What is the literature? Brought to you by CSUSB's John M. Pfau Library. You may have heard the phrase, the literature. In this video, we'll explain what exactly the literature is, and we'll explore the ways in which the literature is different from the information we encounter in our everyday lives. Finally, we'll take a look at the role that attribution plays in helping us to navigate and make sense of the literature. So what is the literature? In short, it is the body of scholarly work in any given field. We sometimes think of the literature as the conversations that scholars have with one another over time. These conversations are more formal than just having a chat over coffee, however, and are had through the publication of sources like journal articles and books. The literature is different from the information we encounter in our everyday lives in many ways. First, the scholarly sources within the literature are considered to have a greater level of authority than popular sources because they are created by experts like your professors. While some disagree that scholarly sources are necessarily better than other types of information, they remain highly valued in academia. You'll notice that unlike popular sources, the sources you find in the literature are not written for just anybody, but are rather meant for others in the same field or discipline. This includes college students as well as other experts who research and write about similar topics. Scholarly sources typically use the language, sometimes referred to as the jargon, of a specific discipline. Thus, these sources are not always accessible to everyone. Finally, the sources you encounter in the literature have a specific purpose. Unlike popular sources, which can give us facts, entertain us, or try to persuade us, the literature typically includes more analysis, which is a big part of what scholars do. Often, you will find that within the literature, there are more questions posed than questions answered. Now, what is the role of attribution in helping us navigate and make sense of the literature? Experts, when they properly reference the work of others, help to create a historical record of the scholarly conversations that occur in the literature. Because scholars want to be able to trace ideas back to their origins and see how these ideas have been contested, challenged, or embraced over time, this historical record allows us to do just that. When scholars reference other sources, they give credit where credit is due. Because ideas have value, attribution is the formal tool that scholars use to recognize the work of others. So what exactly does attribution look like? Well, have you ever seen in-text citations, or a list of works cited or references at the end of a journal article or book? This, my friends, is what attribution looks like in the literature.
Your instructor may ask you to use primary and secondary sources in your literature research assignment. This video is to help you learn what they are and how to identify them. First, let's talk about primary sources. A primary source is the original work of literature. When you're writing a research paper, your primary source is the work of literature you're researching. For example, if I'm writing a paper on Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, the novel Jane Eyre itself is a primary source. For literature, primary sources are novels, plays, and poetry. This is true whether they are in print or electronic format. A primary source does not interpret or evaluate another source. They are the materials on which other research is based. Jane Eyre is an original creation and doesn't interpret other works of literature. That's what makes it a primary source. Now let's discuss secondary sources. A secondary source is written about a primary source, and it does provide analysis and interpretation. It's usually a publication, a book or a journal article, and may cite or quote primary sources. In the example here, we're looking at a page from a book called A Day with Charlotte Bronte, and you can see that the top half of the page is the author of this book writing about the novel Jane Eyre, and the bottom half of the page is a quote from Jane Eyre, which is the primary source. Secondary sources may be written during or after the time period of the primary source. Jane Eyre was published in 1847, and this book is from 1911. Secondary sources in literature are usually literary criticism, which focus on analyzing and interpreting works of literature. So when you're looking for literary criticism, where should you look? You can look up books and ebooks of literary criticism in Gilfind, the library catalog. Using the title of the book or the author's name and the word criticism will help you find secondary sources. If you're looking for articles from journals, Galileo has a group of databases about literature and literary criticism. You can find them under the Browse by Subject option below the search box at the top of the page. And that's the difference between primary and secondary sources in literature. If you've got questions about this or other research topics, you can get in touch with a GPC librarian through chat, text, email, phone, or at any GPC library. When we're closed, our frequently asked questions can help you. All of our contact information is available at this URL. Thanks for watching this video.